Hi, everyone. How's the sound? Good, good. Everyone can hear me in the back? And my name is Megan Ackerman. I work in the city's communications office, and one of the things that I get to do is organize these meetings. How many of you are at your very first ResiStat meeting ever? Awesome. Well, welcome. What you don't know, and what all of you folks who have been here before know, is that this is normally the time I would hand it off to your ward alderman, who would say hello, maybe make a couple of announcements. Tonight, I wanted to pass on regrets from Alderman Clingan. He had a conflicting family obligation tonight, so he was not able to make it. But if any of you need to contact him, all of his contact information is on the city website, so you can email him, give him a call. We are joined tonight by your school committee representative, Andre Green, Mayor Curtatone, who you're going to hear from in just a little bit, as well as Justin Mailing, who, if you haven't met him, is the station area rep for the Gilman Square Green Line extension station that's coming in. So he is the person who has been kind of being a liaison between residents and the team working on the Green Line extension. So he has graciously offered to let me redirect questions, comments, concerns to him. So yeah, I think that's everyone for right now. So tonight we are going to be talking a lot about construction. You may have noticed if you travel around the city, there's a lot going on. When I realized putting the slides together tonight, Ward 4 isn't as heavily hit as some of the other neighborhoods, but there's a lot going on sort of right around the neighborhood that's going to impact you. And there are some things coming up probably in the spring that you're going to see start happening. So we want to let you know about those to make sure you're kind of ready. And you can plan for all of that's coming up. So tonight, Mayor Curtatone is going to kind of talk a little bit about why are all of these things happening all at once. We promise it wasn't a conspiracy to inconvenience all of you. There actually are some reasons. And then we're going to dive into some of the projects that are going on both in Ward 4 and around Ward 4. And then hear from both the fire and police department about some public safety updates, as well as their involvement in planning for construction, because the mayor's going to talk about some of the ways we're going to try to make construction a little easier on you and the businesses, and obviously public safety is also a part of that. So I'm going to turn this over to the mayor while I switch over the slides.
Thanks, Megan. Well, good evening. Happy fall, autumn. We're well into it. And yeah, you know, the first snow emergency is just around the corner. Hopefully not for a while, but it's coming. So as Megan mentioned, and I want to first of all thank you all for coming out this evening. I'm going to kick off, give a little context and overview for some of the discussion around the infrastructure work occurring in the city. Before I do that, I do want to say to all of you how sorry I am. I want to apologize for your inconvenience, the disruption to your lives, your commute. It's not easy. I know it's stressful. I go through it every day. I curse in the mirror on the way. I was driving my kids to school up Temple and the school street every morning. You know, it's not an easy thing. The reason, and part of my context hope to deliver is the values and what we're trying, our objective and what we're trying to do, what we consider when we're taking on major infrastructure improvements of various types, and even how we align financing briefly, and some of the other collateral consequences, you know, like around rodent infestation that may be exacerbated by it. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is improve our quality of life, continue to make Somerville an exceptional place to live, work, play, raise a family, achieve important community goals and values, but getting there is not going to be easy for the next few years. And again, I'm sorry for the inconvenience, I mean that, but we're here to live that with you, get through it, mitigate the impacts, so when we get on the other side, it's just a blip in the screen. So there is a lot going on. If you look at this slide here, just gives you a snapshot of some infrastructure work and the amount of linear footage that is happening just on streetscape and sewer drain rehabilitation, other pipe improvement. From 2015 to 2018, that is a dramatic increase in investment and activity that's occurring in the city. Again, this doesn't include, as I mentioned, other utility work, on the streetscape or below ground that's happening on an everyday and a regular occurrence. So whether it's the water service improvement down on Pearl, the Green Line extension, which actually exacerbates the most recent timeline. It is going to get done. 2 years from now, we will be testing new cars on the extended line, but we should have been in full implementation mode now, running it. And the result, one of the consequences of the delay to recalibrate the project was now it's on top, compounding some of the impacts of the other project. But the Green Line Extension project or the major streetscape and big pipe project down on Somerville Ave East from the middle of Union Square out to McGrath Highway, the vertical construction project we have at the high school, or even improvements of the West Branch. There's a lot going on, and folks, that doesn't include things happening on our boundaries with neighboring communities. It does not include the private sector development projects, though. So there is a litany of projects of subterranean, horizontal, and vertical construction projects on the public and private side that are happening in Somerville every day. This is actually a luxury. Doesn't feel like it when we have to drive through it and all the impacts. But at the end of the day, it's an important luxury, and I want to go a little bit in terms of why. A little history. There's just a water and sewer pipe investment by this community up until, from about mid-century and prior to, that was the greatest investment of water and sewer, that infrastructure work, critical infrastructure work in the city. Well, why? Well, that's when we became our own community. That's when the majority of the housing stock was built, all the critical lines are built, and much of that work was done with the life expectancy of the asset of that infrastructure about 100 years. Now, that doesn't mean that 100 years later, everything's going to start falling apart, although some of it is, quite candidly. We still have pipes, the original pipes and pots in the city that are brick. And when you hear some of the specificity in how we deliver the improvements of this infrastructure and investments to maintain it, you'll hear some interesting things from our engineers. But that stopped right around mid-century. A lot of things stopped around mid-century in Somerville. Know what else we had in the city until then? About 20 rail and trolley stops. Then they said, let's take them away. In came I-93, expanded Route 28, the car became king. And Somerville, for many, many years moving forward up until now, had no deliberate strategic approach to think about how we're going to grow as a community, what are the critical investments, what are the planning and policy decisions, what do we want to be when we grow up. We started to think about that deeply when we came into administration about 15 years ago, working with the community. And many people active, and some of you here advocating in the community, pushed this city to do that, and rightfully so. And so that's starting to change now. But, doing this stuff and lining up the infrastructure is not easy. One, it's expensive. It takes a variety of funding sources. So we'll utilize some local funding, but we leverage that against money that comes from the federal government, from places like HUD, federal transportation money that comes through our MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, other grants from the state and federal government, or if it's a school project from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and then in addition, our regular allotment on our street improvements on a yearly basis. But we leverage that against our own local tax dollars to help achieve our major infrastructure goals. As we make a decision, when we make policy decisions or investment decisions, they're not done off the cuff, although for a long time they were. Quite candidly, when we came, I was amazed when I became mayor, and I was an alderman for 8 years, but not knowing, we really had no street improvement plan or reinvestment plan. We have that now. Every street, every sidewalk, we collect data. We give it a grading on its condition so we can strategically and surgically understand where do we want to allocate those monies for either preventive maintenance or total reconstruction. This is important because notwithstanding the hundreds of millions of dollars we've brought in, record numbers in the city, just on basic street repairs and maintenance, the state does not give us the adequate allotment, or any other city and town across the Commonwealth, quite honestly. So it's important that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. So we collect data on a real-time basis on this and a whole host of other infrastructure projects. But for an example, just as an illustration, we found that if we're investing our dollars wisely on preventive maintenance in our streets in advance of them collapsing totally, or to come into devolve into a degraded condition, we're going to save 7 times more dollars than we would if we just had to wait for it to deteriorate and go back and bring the street down to dirt level and build it back up from its very base. So we're keened in on where our infrastructure status is in terms of its condition, what type of investment has to be made, and that's allowed us to maximize those dollars. And we have this understanding for every bit of infrastructure across our city. That took a lot of time to get done. So why is the infrastructure, all this investment important? Well, several years ago, as a community, we came together with stakeholders and activists and advocates to understand and outline what did we want to be when we grow up over the next 20 plus years. And we had one orienting, overarching value to make Somerville an exceptional place to live, work, play, raise a family. Following that value, there were some critical goals around the amount of housing units we want to build in the city. How much of that should be permanently affordable. By the way, that number will get pushed higher. That was several years ago, and we're going back to re-examine all our progress on these goals. But I just want to put this out there to explain how much new development will come in the city. How much of that will be commercial? Where will the majority of that new growth take place? How many new jobs will we create over that time? How much more usable open space we'll create? And this is really important because I will tell you, to unlock the opportunity to achieve these goals, one thing is sown through that, is one underlying fact that is the infrastructure must be in place. Streets must be accessible, and sidewalks. We must be able to bike and walk more. We must bring in public transportation. We have to deal with the non-exciting but critical stuff of water and sewer and eliminating CSOs and so forth. We expanded upon these goals more intensely. One, we established our goal to be Vision Zero, to eliminate all serious or fatal accidents involving pedestrians and bicyclists in the city. How do we invest in our infrastructure to result in this and get this positive result? We said we want to be carbon neutral as a community. What in our infrastructure and our vertical assets and other assets help us achieve that goal? Again, our open space, and then our more intense neighborhood plans in neighborhoods like Union Square and Assembly, down in Gilman and up in Winter Hill. Everything, the one common factor, common denominator, and all that is the infrastructure has to be in place to allow that to happen. That is why we put such a deliberate, intense approach, persistent approach in getting it done. But we know that getting there is not easy. All you have to do is go through the city any day, rush hour. It's tough out there. And again, I want to say how sorry I am for that inconvenience. But I promise you it's going to be great when you get to the other side. Maybe if I can show the slides here. I'm sorry. You get that? Here we go. Good. So, how do we live through that? How do we bridge now through this very inconvenient time over the next few years? We are literally doing 50 years of infrastructure over the next 3 to 5. That is not easy to do and mitigate, but you should know we're keened in on this. We're analyzing data. We're trying to communicate with you. There's information here at the table, but I encourage you to sign up for our notifications at construction@somervillema.gov. This is the best newsletter I've ever seen the city put out. It gives you real-time information about changes that occur in street closures, scheduled power outages, so forth, related to these major infrastructure projects. In addition, with the help of the Board of Aldermen, and I want to thank them, we've got support for some important positions to help us communicate and engage the community and get the information out. Erica Mace is our Construction Public Information Officer. That's Erica right over there. Jesse Moose is our Construction Liaison and Compliance Manager. Jesse's not here tonight, right? But he's out in the neighborhoods. And Viola Augustine is our GLX Project Liaison. They're out in the neighborhoods, in the business districts, engaging community members and businesses every day. But again, I encourage you to sign up for that email list, because that really gets the information to you on a real-time basis. Some of the other things we're concerned about is not just the congestion we face every day, a basic quality of life issue, which I never thought I'd have to pay so much attention to in my political career, are rodents, rats in particular. This, if you haven't, who here has experienced a rodent infestation in the neighborhood? I'm going to raise my hand because, Mr. Stone, I've had it on our street recently. All it takes is one property, one nest, and the infestation doesn't impact just our properties. You know, there's a very wide radius of homes and families that are impacted. So, you know, we know, for example, some of the factors or variables that intensify rodent infestation. One, climate change is real, folks, because when the winters are more mild, we've seen from the data when the sightings, the reportings increase. Now, this is a snapshot of just who calls in reports, but it is a very accurate universe of what we're seeing out there. We know, so again, when it's colder, they drop. We paid really close attention. We established a rodent advisory task force in the city, working with the Board of Aldermen. We used some innovative approaches here to bring what was a statistically significant decrease a few years ago. What that is directly related to is two things the city did. One, it might have been a colder winter. That helps. However, that's when we went to unified trash containers or trash lids in the city. So everybody has the same trash container. They're hardened. So, you know, your old trash cans or trash bags, the rodents just chewed right through them. So that cut off a critical food source. At the same time, the city re-examined its dumpster permitting policy. We found that many of the dumpsters were re-permitting, were not in satisfactory standard of repair or condition. So they were deteriorating, they had holes in them, they were corroded, and rodents would get into them. There was another, and this is nasty, but it's important, food source to the access. We examined all those, and we had, and this was actually written about, a statistically significant drop at the time in the reportings, and that ticked up again with a more mild winter. Well, in terms of how it relates to infrastructure improvements, we have so much construction, development, infrastructure work happens. When nests get disrupted, it certainly, you know, it pushes rodents out, and they go into new neighborhoods and they find new homes. So it's important we've kept up to date about what conditions my yard in or my neighbor's yard. Do we have overgrowth? Is trash or garbage not being stored properly? Those type of things exacerbate, give haven to future nests. When you put your pet out at night, like I do, my two dogs, do you leave the water out at night? Do you leave the water bowl filled? Well, water is the other critical nutrient they need that you want to dump out and put it on the tree, and the tree stump or on your flower bed, so they don't have access to that. So, and again with the milder winters, again it changes. So we are paying close attention to this. We even heat map this type of impact in our city. The darker, the deeper the red you can see is where the intensity of the calls are. Mr. Stone, there's our 10 Hills neighborhood. We actually just have a new reporting where that nest might be. We think it's in the hill when you come down the steps to 28, and then down by the boathouse. And there are a couple of properties there. We've had that recently. I mean, but also in other parts of the city where it's directly correlated to some of these massive construction projects, and here, perhaps around the Green Line corridor, which is important for this conversation. But what I would encourage you to do, when you see one rodent, 10 rodents, or the same one 5 times in a day, is to get that reported to us. Call 311, send an email report, but because we do track it. And we think about the things we want to do. And we're getting guidance, folks, from the most renowned rat scientist in the nation, believe it or not, who's worked hand in hand with our team, our staff. I even had the opportunity to walk with him, but he's helped us understand in the Green Line corridor and other parts of the city where massive work is underway, where nests could be born, what to look for, what the signs are, and some of our approaches to mitigate the rodent population. We're never, ever going to eliminate it. It's kind of like taxes. It's always going to be around. The question is we want to keep it mitigated. So we're deploying a whole host of innovative approaches, paying close attention to this, but we know some of you might be living next to the Green Line project. If something's disturbing in the rail bed, something might creep into your yard or your neighbor's yard, it's important we know about that and get some services and interventions from the city on top of that. The other part is when we're doing this type of work, we certainly feel the disruption, the inconvenience every day. Our small businesses do. Now, all the studies show, all the studies show that the infrastructure work we're undertaking is going to have great positive impact on businesses, because the higher your walk score, the higher your bike score, all the data shows you have a greater impact on your local businesses. People will be attracted to those active sidewalks and streets and tend to frequent their local establishments more. But also, all the data shows that there is real disruption to that activity. Local businesses tend to take a hit during that timeline. So we're undertaking a few things to make sure that local businesses not only survive, but they thrive and they're sustained during that time period. And when they come out, they're even stronger, so they can reap the benefits. Will be even more increased economic activity. We're doing things to promote our neighborhoods and enabling a lot of small business support, activities like placemaking and place identifying, like Ball on Ball Square, the great party we had down in Gilman to let people know these are destinations, these are neighborhoods, or there's a collection, an eclectic mix of different establishments you can frequent. We're also trying to communicate. We'll be launching some interesting PSAs, public service announcements, telling people in the outside world, hey, if you we welcome you to Somerville to conduct business. We'd encourage you to come to our neighborhoods. But if you're coming here just to get to Kendall or get somewhere else, don't bother, because your life's going to be very difficult coming through here. And we're really working with some advisors on this. We've seen when the state's done it with their work on Comm Ave. What was the percentage of commuters who would avoid? In Comm Ave, when the state would take on these. Yeah, 25% of the commuters would you see a decrease in 25% of the commuters. But why is this important? Because 85% of the people who commute into Somerville are going through Somerville. They're not going to Gilman or Ball or down in Assembly or in Union or in Davis. They're going somewhere else. So we're putting a lot of investment in our messaging and this type of campaign. Again, in promoting people to patronize their local shops. We're going to be putting a lot of investment. You'll hear as we are planning for the bridge closures related to the Green Line and other infrastructure work to think about traffic cutting through our neighborhood streets, whether it be increasing or better signalization or synchronization, or traffic calming and mitigation, or boots on the ground. People, officers on the street in different intersections where queuing may be so intense that those other measures may not work. Your participation into that, your communication to what you see real time is our best conduit for that data, and that's what we encourage you to give us, whether it's citing rodents, understanding how traffic's queuing up, or whether it's cut-through traffic. And look, at the end of the day, we're going to be side by side with the community. We live here, we work here to make sure that we get through it together. We're going to be much better off on the other side. We will reap incredible benefits socially, economically, environmentally for the entire community. The Green Line alone takes 25,000 cars off a day off the streets in Somerville. That's important. And we're trying to, at the end of the day, build a community from people. Because if we allow a community to stand the way it's planned for now for cars, that's what we're going to get. But if we can move towards developing and building a community for the human scale, our lives are going to be much better off. We're all going to be much better off. So before I turn it over to get more detail to some of these projects from our staff and our team and in Ward 4, happy to take a couple of questions. Yes, the Stone.
In 7 months, Encore is going to be planning to be opening. What is happening to mitigate traffic in our area?
So the question is, in Encore, the casino, formerly Wynn, will be opening in 7 months. What is being done to mitigate traffic? And Brad will be able to get into this detail. I'll just kick it off by saying, that's a real concern. Whether you're for gaming or not, I'm against. I thought that we were able to get some mitigation money, but dollars. But at the end of the day, now we're trying to work with them because they actually share the same concern, because the congestion that already exists now in this region, by the way, this is the 6th most congested region in the United States. The congestion in and around Sullivan Square wasn't of their making. We expect it to get worse. And really the state needs to be bolder in what their interventions are. So we are part of a working group with Cambridge, Boston, Everett, the Commonwealth, and the Encore representatives. Brad will get into some of that detail, but they're about to release a final report of the Lower Mystic Working Group, that's what it's called, that identifies the types of interventions and investments that need to be made along Route 99 and adjacent corridors, whether they be dedicated BRT lanes, other investments in public transportation, a whole host of things to assist in the mitigation of traffic congestion. It is serious. There are no good answers yet, but that's what we hope, Brad, when we get up here, that'll be, they'll be releasing the final report from that working group, and then the question is to get the state to make the major investments, because Encore is required, has provided, I don't know, how many millions of dollars to the state? $100 million? About $100 million towards that type of mitigation, as well as they provided monies to increase, better the headways and expand the capacity along the Orange Line as well, because that has an impact, because some of that service is so, it's so tight, the service, it's so crowded on the trains, there are people actually will drive or go backwards commute a station to the jumping on Orange Line train, because by the time it gets to Somerville, literally their face is pressed against the window. There's so many people in the cars. So yeah, I don't have a direct answer yet. Brad, you can go into when you get up here, but that's what we're waiting to do right now. Yes, hi.
So second, right now I notice when I leave my mother's house to go to work in the morning, my commute's not bad. But once the bridge closes on Broadway, is that gonna, my commute's still gonna be bad, but is that gonna, McGrath Highway and all the way down by Assembly Square is gonna be a zoo? Because people are gonna be going to the casino.
Yeah, I'll have Brad get into more of the data, what we're seeing there, and what we're doing around all the bridge closures, because it's going to be Ball, it's going to be even down at Washington Street in East Somerville. Those are going to overlap. Washington Street and East Somerville will be at 2 different stages, as you've seen. Yep.
I would like to go home and be able to see my husband sometime in the next year.
Yes, we want to make sure we're able to travel in and around the city. So we'll talk about some of the important measures we're going to take and the state's taking. You'll be able to get that whole section on that. Okay, yeah. So the question is, why call the city? I'm going to paraphrase about rats. Are they going to come out there and solve the rat problem? We're going to come out. Why call the city? What's important? Because the data is going to help guide us, because we have some resources to deploy. We're trying to understand where the source of that infestation is. It's not always what it appears to be. So yeah, we will deploy manpower and resources. We'll get a better understanding of what may or may not be happening. If it's a blighted property, we're going to move quickly in that property. If it's a result of the GLX project, we're going to understand what's happening in the corridor, and so forth. And we're going to also get services. There is some residential road and abatement program to get people to. So it's going to be really a multi-pronged approach, so getting that information to us as real time as possible is important. That's why. Okay, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here the whole night. Happy to talk to you one-on-one. But if I take up the whole night, I will get yelled at by staff. So in terms of who's kicking off the projects in? Brad? Well, you're lucky. So our Director of Transportation and Infrastructure for the City of Somerville is our own Somerville resident, Brad Rawson. So he'll talk about the Ward 4 projects and these other issues.
Just before Brad hops up here, as the mayor was talking, I realized one of my usual announcements that I usually make but didn't tonight. All of us are going to be sticking around after the meeting. So if you have a question or issue that maybe you would prefer to talk to someone about privately, or if it's maybe a really detailed, in-depth kind of thing, and you can just hold off on that until the end of the meeting so we can try to get through some of the other things that might be a little more general interest, that would be appreciated. Also, if you either need to leave early or there's not someone here who can help you with your question or issue, my card is over on the table you passed on the way in. Feel free to grab that, send me an email, and maybe I'll be able to answer your question, but I will definitely be able to hook you up with the person who can answer your question. So with that, I will turn it back over to Brad.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Mayor. Hi, everybody. My name is Brad Rawson. As the mayor said, I'm a Somerville resident. I've been part of this community for about 11 years now. I'm a Somerville dad. My little 3-year-old is going to be part of the amazing renaissance of the Somerville Public Schools. Thanks to Andre Green and all the other members of the community who have worked so hard to help us achieve this incredible kind of moment where we're reaping the benefits of, as the mayor said, strategic planning, 20 years, 30 years in the making. The team that I'm responsible for in the mayor's office is really focused on physical planning. We do parks, we do urban forestry, and we do transportation in all of its forms. One of our fantastic staff is here tonight, Adam Polinsky, who's a Ward 4 resident, and he's going to talk about some of the transportation stuff specifically. And to some of the questions earlier, the only way out of this paper bag, the only way out of the national crisis and congestion that has been exacerbated locally by a variety of issues is public transit, is great walking, bicycling, and transit options that are legitimate, that are genuine, reliable. We know that everybody needs different ways to get around at different stages of their lives. Heck, I was a 365-day-a-year bicycle rider before I became a parent. Now I drive much more than I used to. It's just a fact of life. We need to plan for everybody an equitable and resilient transportation system. But I'll tell you what, if we keep moving around this great city in 8-foot by 20-foot steel boxes that weigh 2 tons and pollute our air and menace our pedestrians, we are missing the point. We are missing this moment of revolution in the way that we can travel around our cities. So as the mayor said, it's all about quality of life. We try to get our residents in these moments of disruption to keep their eyes on the prize and say, why do we do what we do? It's about living active, fulfilled lives that are connected socially to our community. Did anybody have the opportunity to come out to our ribbon cutting at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School in Ward 4 just 2 months ago? Chairman Green was there. Does anybody have a kid at the Winter Hill instead of here at the Healy? Oh, folks, the days are getting short. The weather's turning lousy. Do yourselves a favor. The next time you're walking your dog, next time you're just looking for something a little different in the neighborhood to get some peace and quiet, come down here to the Winter Hill Schoolyard at the corner of Thurston and Evergreen. We rebuilt a $1 million schoolyard that serves the needs of the educators, the students, and the community as a whole. It's like 3 or 4 parks in one, and we take a great deal of pride of it. So here you just kind of see a quick little image of it. So that's part of our team's portfolio. We're not going to dwell on that stuff, but if folks have questions about the Mystic River Reservation, Draw 7 Park, Foss Park, Blessings of the Bay Boathouse, we can certainly talk about those as well. And I'm going to turn this over to Adam very, very briefly to actually emphasize our bus mobility strategies, and then I'll start talking about Green Line stuff. But to the gentleman's question about Wynn Resorts, so they're paying about $7 million of operating subsidy to the MBTA so that the MBTA can run Orange Line trains on a more frequency. Today, the Orange Line is supposed to run at about once every 6 or 6.5 minutes during kind of the peak commuting hours. The MBTA is manufacturing a bunch of Orange Line trains right now, but even if they had those trains, and it's another couple of years before they actually brought into the service, but if they had them today, they actually wouldn't have necessarily the operators, the staff, or the traffic signals to run those trains as frequently as they should. Wynn is helping to pay for additional operators and additional service frequency that will ultimately help the T get that frequency down to about 4.5 minutes a couple years from now. We happen to think that it should be coming every 3 minutes. That would really put it on par with real high-functioning transit networks around the country. But help is on the way. The MBTA and the governor's team are investing in the T, and it's just going to be another year or two before the Orange Line is starting to function as that reliable sponge for mobility and give people an alternative to hopping on an Uber, hopping on a Lyft, whether they're going to work at the casino, whether they're going to patronize it, etc. We're also trying to get them to do more to improve traffic safety, so they're obligated to do a bunch of improvements in Sullivan Square. Anybody who's been down in Sullivan lately would tell you that it's been very, very challenging. Part of the reason that we're actually kind of cautiously optimistic about this is that they're going to be building some protected and dedicated bus facilities. Adam's going to talk about some Somerville jobs in your neighborhood that we're hoping to do as well. But Route 89, Route 101, Route 90 are all going to get into the Sullivan busway easier as a result of some of that mandatory mitigation that Wynn's been obligated to pay. They're also helping us do some work with the horrible, horrible rat's nest of high-speed ramps and tunnels where I-93 and 38 and 28 all come together. We know that folks in 10 Hills, in Winter Hill, and other parts of the neighborhood have a hard time getting to the river, have a hard time getting to Assembly, and Wynn is helping pay for the city of Somerville to work with MassDOT to redesign that network of ramps to make it a little bit more humane and safer. So they're paying a bunch. We argued that they should have paid more, but it's going to open up 6 months from now, and this is part of the reason that we're addressing some of these kind of Central Broadway and Mystic Avenue mobility solutions with such urgency. So let me hand things off to Adam for a quick moment to talk about the community process, the technical work, and what the city is trying to do to speed up MBTA buses on Broadway.
Thanks, Brad. Hey, everyone. Sorry. My name's Adam Polinsky. I'm a transportation planner for the city. I work on Brad's team, one of 2 planners. I am a Ward 4 resident, as Brad mentioned, and I use Broadway to commute every day to City Hall. I walk, I don't drive, but I see all the cars, I see all the buses, I see all the bicyclists, and I see everyone walking around the neighborhood, and I feel like I have a really good feel for it. And I was really excited when earlier this year, Brad and the rest of our team started talking about Central Broadway and putting together funding and an outreach strategy and developing a new design to really rethink how this corridor functions, because it's been neglected for a long time and we knew it was overdue for some enhancements. What you'll see here is actually Broadway over in Everett, and they did something pretty revolutionary a couple years ago, which was to take a take a parking lane, restrict it from 7 to 9 a.m., and allow the 109 bus to use that during the a.m. rush hour when not a lot of people are parking to improve bus speeds. We thought that was pretty awesome, and knowing that yes, thank you. And knowing that the 89 and the 101 are second and third in ridership in Somerville, behind the 86, and they both use Broadway, that this was a really important corridor to reconsider how we can speed up the buses. So we, with that as a backdrop, we started to reach out to the community. I don't know if any of you have heard, but we, earlier in the spring, we sent out a survey, received over 1,000 responses, and tried to gauge where people are at and what we're sort of looking at and what the main concerns are. And what you'll see here, one of the things that we asked residents was, what would you like to see in a new design of Broadway? And far and above, which kind of makes sense, the most important thing was just put some paint on the ground, for goodness sakes. Like, let's just put some paint on the ground. There's areas of the street where it merges in and it merges out. Is it 2 lanes? Is it 1 lane? What's going on? So that we can do. That is part of this project. People want more safe places to cross the street. That is another thing that we would absolutely love to do. The tough part about that is that concrete and new ramps are very expensive. We are currently looking into a way to restructure our sidewalk reconstruction program so that we can add more crosswalks. We're not quite there yet, but we didn't think that should stop us from implementing this project. So we're going to continue to move forward. Paint and signage are where we're at right now, and that's really important for numbers 3 and 4, which are bike lanes and bus lanes, which we're really hoping to implement as part of this project. Very few people said that we should leave Broadway the way it is. We were kind of hoping that would be the case, and we kind of expected it. But it sort of teed us up to continue thinking about this the way that we are already going forward. So we're happy that the community agrees with us on that. To give you guys a little bit more backdrop, we started to really dig into the data. We have this really cool database that we get from the MBTA that shows how long it takes to get from stop to stop. So what you'll see here is from Magoon Square up to Norwood Ave, and then going along the corridor from stop to stop all the way down to McGrath Highway. That's the average time in seconds it takes in the sunrise hour, which is like 6 a.m. So you wouldn't expect any traffic. If there were no cars on the streets, this is how long you would expect to take from stop to stop. Maybe takes 2 or 3 minutes to get from one end to the other. So that's sort of, it got screwed up, but that should be at the top of those bars. However, if you look at what that looks like the rest of the day, those values get a lot higher, particularly at the green, which is the AM peak. So from 7 to 9 a.m. heading eastbound, which I don't think any of us are surprised by, traffic is the worst and it takes you the longest to get from Magoon to McGrath. So what we could potentially do is dedicate space for buses so that they can use their own lane and get closer to those free flow conditions. That's also combined with signal timing. We have to keep parking in mind. There are a lot of other things for us to consider, but that's sort of the goal and that's the baseline we're going to, and it's no small change. On average, you could save a minute going from Magoon to McGrath. However, in really bad traffic, it takes upwards of 10, 12 minutes to get from Magoon to McGrath. And if you can dedicate that space and separate the buses from the traffic, it makes it a much more appealing option, and it makes it much safer really, because it also allows pedestrians to have better places to cross. There's not 6 lanes of traffic, maybe there's only 4, there's 2. So it's something that we're using data to try and figure out when would we do this, how long would it be, where are the best places where we get the most bang for our buck. And we've been excited that we have this data, working with the MBTA and trying to move this forward. So what you'll see here is probably not what you're going to end up seeing on the street. Ideally, we're going to go for spring implementation. Stay tuned. We will have a public meeting over the winter before any of this gets said and done. But this is a concept that we're looking at right now. You have a bus lane next to a couple of travel lanes. On the north side, it's probably hard to see, but there's a travel lane next to a buffered bike lane, and that maintains the aisle of parking as well. We're trying to figure out whether or not that would be from 7 to 9 a.m. buses could use it, parking is restricted. Maybe it's from 7 to 7, maybe it's 24/7. But those are the conversations we need to have with the community and hash out before we make any decisions on that. So stay tuned. We're excited about this project. As a Ward 4 resident, I'm excited about this project. We want to move this forward. We want to finish our outreach. We've gotten a ton of feedback from the community already in the survey. We've talked to the Winter Hill Neighborhood Association, to representatives of the Mystic Tenants Association. So there is buy-in. People really want to improve bus service. They want to make this a safer corridor, and we think it's long overdue to get that way and to get there. So I'll be here afterwards if anyone has any questions. You can take your contact info if you want to know when the meeting is. We'll be doing some outreach around that when it comes time. But for now, I'll hand it back to Brad, and thank you very much. Can I take a question? Yes.
I first heard about this, I can't even remember now. Last ResiStat meeting, one before that, we've been talking about putting new paint on Broadway. This seems like a relatively simple fix that doesn't require a lot of hardware. And now you're talking about not until the spring. Why does this take more than a year to do?
Well, there are a few things. One, from the time we started talking about it to when we were actually considering getting the paint down, we had a concept design in hand. We needed to pull together some funding. We realized after getting initial estimates that this, even though it's just paint, it's a mile-long stretch. It's like $250,000. We needed to acquire that, so that took some time to get that together. We also had to go to a third-party consultant to get the design from concept to 100% plans. That took more time than we were expecting as well. So we were hoping to have that in hand by now and ready to have things ready to go, but that just hasn't been the case. So even if we had them finish it, we would have still had to do some outreach at this point, and we just weren't at a place where we felt that we should try and rush things, that we should take our time, do a little bit more outreach over the winter, make sure the design we have is the right one, and then put it down in the spring, because it probably will be this way for a few years. So there were just a few things that took longer than we thought, and we figured at this point we were running up against the end of the season. We obviously can't do anything over the winter, so our goal is first thing next spring. And I'm sorry about that. I know it's unfortunate, and it's taken much longer than anyone would like. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, we totally hear you. It's unfortunate some of this stuff takes too long, whether it's a park project, whether it's a street project. Some of the stuff we're held hostage by the utility companies. If I had a dime for every time we talked about an important street safety project that's kind of depending on Eversource gas getting in and getting out. National Grid obviously was doing big trench work here on Broadway last year. We all know about their lockout. We all know about the kind of the horror story that's occurred up in the Merrimack Valley that has had some trickle effects. Some of these other utility jobs. So yeah, we are humble about the fact that we wish that this had happened this year. And as recently as a couple months ago, Adam and I were looking at each other, we're like, what if we get lucky and we get the paint crews and the availability? Can we get this through? It's also been a rainy season. There have been so many cancellations. So it's just been issue after issue. But we've got a contract signed. We're optimistic that in the springtime we'll be ready to go here. So one other quick thing, if anybody's particularly interested in this stuff, and again, we're transit nerds, we're sustainability nerds, but the city of Boston has been doing awesome stuff in Roslindale recently. City of Everett is actually the regional leader on these issues, and the Mayor DiMaria's point person on these issues is a Somerville resident, a guy named Jay Monty, who's been a real visionary and is getting national press for this exact type of treatment over in Everett. So the other side of the mobility coin that we wanted to showcase very, very quickly is that when people tell us, and they tell us all the time, that there are too many cars moving too quickly on residential streets, we hear you, we empathize. We're trying to mobilize resources very quickly to get good results and make sure that we communicate those results to our residents. So we've been using this ResiStat cycle to showcase some very quick, short money experiments. Has anybody been over to another important park that we opened up this year, Hoyt Sullivan on Central Street? Oh my gosh, it's so great. It's like my favorite. So our Parks project manager recognized that there was this crosswalk and that there's, of course, too many cars moving too quickly on Central Street by Rogers Foam and Vernon Street Studios. We put in a little flashing pedestrian sign. Not saying that this is a silver bullet or works everywhere, but we put down the standard data collection tubes across the street before it and after it. And wonder of wonders, we showed something like 40% of the cars were exceeding 25 miles per hour prior to the intervention, and something like 35% or 30% were exceeding 25 afterwards. So are there confounding variables here? Yeah, of course, but this is a cool way to do our work. Our residents are every bit as hungry for data as our mayor and our staff are. So you can find this now online. Another experiment, does anybody live on the west side of the top of Winter Hill? Folks must have seen these red-backed crosswalks. This has been our biggest success story. So there's 3 of them in a row at Central, at Bartlett, and at Glenwood. And we saw like a remarkable 75% of vehicles were exceeding 25 miles per hour. It's no surprise. Central Broadway functions as a drag strip. It's 100 feet wide. It sends every psychological signal to drivers to drive fast. And we put in these curb extensions and we put in this paint. And we got from 75% down to about 30% of cars exceeding 25 miles per hour. That's a remarkable success story. We're going to want to replicate going around. Even something as simple as a humble bike lane. We put this one over in Ward 1 on East Somerville. And again, that optical illusion of making the street feel a little bit narrower than it really is has been demonstrated to start helping and slow the cars down. So again, we hear you. As the mayor said, we empathize. We live these realities every day where there's congestion and cars not moving at all, or cars moving too fast, the other side of the coin. Moving on to our green line content, folks. Holly, to your question, yeah, the Broadway Bridge is keeping us up at night. It's keeping our first responders up, our mayor, our communications office, and our staff. We did 20 outreach events over the course of spring, summer, and fall. And it was actually really cool. Eric had this great idea to track the number of people that we were having conversations with at all of our tabling events, at the Summer Streets events, at Art Beat, at all of the different Riverfest and other types of events. And we actually had more than 2,200 conversations. So media still matters. Email blast lists still matter. Social networks, faith-based communities, small businesses matter. But as we go out there and do that different type of engagement, not just community meetings at night in a middle school cafeteria, we found that we can reach an amazing number of our stakeholders. And so as a result, we're using this ResiStat cycle to continue to reinforce that great progress so everybody knows that that Broadway Bridge is going to be closed. People always say, could the T do it one lane at a time? People always say, what about the Fast 14 project up on I-93? Fast 14 was different. They were replacing the deck here on Broadway in Ball Square. This is the dialysis clinic. Kelly's Diner is over here. What we think of as kind of the main business district is over this way. So here's Boston Ave, and here's Broadway coming up towards Trump Field and Winter Hill. They have to take this whole thing apart, the deck, but they also have to demolish the big concrete abutments 20 feet above your head and 20, 30 feet below grade that support the roadway so they can actually widen things. You think about it, this rail corridor today handles 2 diesel locomotives for the commuter rail. In the future, it needs to handle those and 2 electrified trolleys for the Green Line. So it's just a lot more space you have to create. It is safer, faster, and cheaper for the Commonwealth to build it and pull the Band-Aid off and create additional disruption and challenge for the community. This was one of the things that was necessary to save the Green Line. And folks, anybody who says that they were bluffing, that they would never have canceled this thing, I was there. The mayor was there. If there was a different way, we would have done it. They were serious. They would have canceled the Green Line, as ridiculous as it sounds to us. And hard decisions like this were part of what allowed us to save this important project that we've been all working for 40 years. So the detour routes in the westbound direction, you come off of Winter Hill, west on Broadway, you get forced to turn left on Cedar Street. So if you're trying to get out to West Somerville, West Med, East Arlington, you're going to get pushed down Cedar Street to Highland Ave and through Davis, and then you'll come back up College Avenue to the Rotary. In the eastbound direction, the opposite happens, and the city of Medford actually bears the burden. So you're coming off of by Doherty's Funeral Home. Here's the Rotary. You get pushed north on Warner, past St. Clement's Church, Titan Gas, underneath the rail corridor, and up to the corner of Harvard and Main. And then you sneak back towards Magoon up the backside of Winter Hill, up Medford, what we think of as the backside of Winter Hill and Medford Street. All this information is online. We have videotaped and published all the community meetings, so you can get kind of that full dive. We want to just provide a quick little summary of the issues. Again, our first responders are here to talk about some of their preparations. They've been in the room every step of the way, and the T has actually been good about listening to us with some of our concerns, so we can get into those details a little bit more. The latest information, and we're continuing to share it as quickly as it's made available, is call it March 1st. End of February, early March, that bridge will be closed. Massive impacts to Route 89 bus service, to Route 80 bus service. It's part of the reason that we're feeling a degree of urgency to try to get the better bus and the dedicated lanes launched for Central Broadway to make up some of that lost time. So with that in mind, let me keep moving here and ask, I'll take a question or two, and then I'll ask Chief Breen and Chief Fallon and their deputies to come up here as well. Anybody have any questions about traffic calming, about Green Line issues? Yes, ma'am, please. The question was about the casino and their operating hours. So two questions, I'll try to address them both. So the first one was about the casino and about whether the MBTA can provide any additional operating hours if you have second shift workers, for example, if you have late night or weekend service for the patrons. Is that the question? Yeah, and so this is actually an interesting one. We have advocated, along with the city of Boston, along with the city of Cambridge, and actually along with like the city of Chelsea and Revere and Logan Airport and Massport, that the T should be doing more overnight and kind of early morning service. Most of their routes shut down, and they actually listened to our advocacy. This was about a year ago, and they took 5 or 6 key bus routes, in particular the ones that feed, kind of the nightlife districts and the airport, which has those kind of 3 shifts worth of work hours, and they've added essentially 24/7 bus service. So that was kind of a cool step that they took to try to make sure that people have a choice, and again, are just not calling the Uber, throwing $25 of their paycheck into every ride, or not having to take long walks in the middle of the night and have safety concerns. So I think that there are about half a dozen bus routes that are providing better service in and around the casino. That's kind of the epicenter for it all. The second question was about our streets. And yes, the mayor talked about bringing a data-driven approach to actually understand the depreciation. Not every street ages at the same rate, but there are some kind of basic metrics. I always think about Medford Street in Ward 4 when I come down from Magoon Square towards City Hall, towards School Street. It's brutal. It's like the craters of the moon. As the mayor said, in the old days, we used to have an approach which was the worst problem that you could see, that's the one that you just fix. And what happens if a year or two later the gas company comes in and says, oh, we need to upgrade the gas service? What happens if there's something else that needs to be coordinated? We now have a better way to understand where Eversource, where the city's water and sewer department, the MWRA need to be. And we're trying to organize that stuff. So I agree that there are many streets that are in a kind of a deficient condition. And we're trying to make sure that we have a transparent approach to actually repaving them. One that we just got through just a couple of days ago was Webster Avenue, and Adam and I were down on Webster Avenue, and we're like, we finally got one of these awful streets paved. So we have a program. It's online. It's kind of data-driven, and rest assured, Medford Street is on next year's list, right, Adam? Yep. If there are other specific ones that you have in mind beyond Broadway, grab me afterwards, and we'll try to make sure that we can kind of communicate to you or to your neighbors which ones will get paved next. And Jess Fosbrook, our assistant city engineer, is here, and you can talk about the coordination with some of the other utilities in case I've misrepresented anything. So I've talked a bunch. Yes, ma'am. Last one.
The arrows on your map there
Oh, good catch. I actually lingered on a different slide, which is for the Medford Street bridge closure out back of the high school. Both eastbound and westbound detours will be using Pearl and we'll be using McGrath. So this is not the Broadway. Yeah, forgive me.
Well, to go back to Broadway then, it seems odd to me that we have people turning left in order to go the direction they want to go. Why is that? I'm sure you have reasons.
Great question. The question was, why aren't these essentially following the same route? Wouldn't it be more efficient for westbound traffic maybe to peel out in Magoon Square and go down Medford Street? This was, just one of those shared pain sort of compromises between the city of Medford and the city of Somerville. And again, you folks have given us an earful. You've given us some important feedback about how painful some of these detours are going to be. Mayor Burke and her team in the city of Medford have heard exactly the same thing from folks on their side of the line. And so ultimately the compromise that was reached was that each city, each neighborhood would be asked to bear, 50% of the burden by splitting things up. And so the westbound one seemed to make more sense for us.
I'm sorry, I didn't make myself clear. It seems like as you're heading west, you want to make a right turn to take that northern, right, no. As you're heading west, you go north, and then now?
You mean little Winchester Street right here?
No, I'm not.
The question is left turn versus right turn.
Yeah, that's my question. How come you don't make the detour by taking a right turn instead of both sides making left turns to take the detour?
So, Drumfield, left turn onto Cedar, southbound, right turn on Highland to Davis in your westbound direction, right?
Yeah, so why would you start that by making a left turn
Instead of swinging off this way?
instead of just taking the northern detour? Yes.
Oh, forgive me again. Yeah, Medford said that they were only good with one direction's worth of detour traffic.
Just like having these
Just switch them out.
Yeah. I think the bus detours. Again, sorry for taking 5 minutes, folks. I assume that a lot of it was about the bus movements, and ultimately they said that the west and the east made more sense for them for that standpoint. But be happy to. This is the official detour. This is what was published. They had 6 or 8 months, and forgive me if it took me a while to not answer your question.
I'm sure there's a good reason, because I know a huge amount of thought planning has gone into this. I'm just very curious about what it is.
I'd much rather both of the routes might have gone up through Medford, but okay, folks, that's enough for me. Thanks so much. I'll stick around and be available for questions after. Chief Breen, you want to come up? Lots of traffic studies. We got all sorts of quantitative data about existing conditions. I'll be happy to talk to you about those. Yeah, we've got all that in those numbers, and that'll be subject to community meetings. It's online, and we can make sure that folks have access to them.
Just before Chief Breen jumps up here, we had 2 more quick updates on some projects that, while not in Ward 4, may have some impacts on Ward 4. So one is actually happening in my neighborhood of Union Square. In the next month or so, there's going to be a detour put in through the heart of the square. We don't have an exact date for that. Some of it depends on some Eversource work wrapping up. So we will have a bit of lead time to get that date out. So that's just something to keep an eye on if your commute takes you through Union Square at all. There are some detour routes. They're up on our website. And Jess Fosbrook from our engineering department just wanted to give a quick update on some of the work that was going on Pearl Street, which slightly spilled over into Ward 4.
Thanks, Megan. I'm Jess Fosbrook, Assistant Director of Engineering. You may have noticed down at the southern edge of Ward 4, we've had some water main upgrades going on Pearl Street. So we have pipes as old as 1889 in this area. And so we are cleaning them. They suffer from tuberculation, which is a corrosion and that severely deteriorates the size of the pipe. But we're able to clean that, cement line it. So we've been doing that from Pearl Street, on Pearl Street between Medford Street to just past Cross Street this year, and that work will be wrapping up in just a few weeks. You may have seen the temporary bypass water that's been on, so houses and businesses along there have been fed from that for this construction season, so that'll all be coming up, wrapping up soon. We'll have a little bit of work in that area on Pearl Street next year, and then we'll start phase 2 of the project in the spring, which will run from Rush Street, so just past Cross Street, over to Mount Vernon Street, doing the same thing, cleaning and lining the pipe, installing new valves and tees as well. And so we will be coming back to be doing some paving work in this area of Pearl Street, temporary paving, patching paving ahead of some more permanent paving scheduled for 2020 for Pearl Street. So that's it for Pearl Street. Yes. Yeah, so we're looking at late summer next year for all of Pearl Street. Early December. Yeah. Sure, yeah, the question was, do we have a date for that work wrapping up? And so the work for phase 1 between Pearl Street and Cross Street is early December. We'll be wrapping that up. All right, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Charlie Breen. I'm the fire chief, Ward 6 resident. With me tonight is Chris Major. He's my chief of operations. He's a resident of Ward 4. I can empathize with the woman in the background, in the back there, about traffic. I get angry phone calls from my wife as she's trying to take my daughter up to the high school in the morning, and she's yelling at me, why can't I do anything about the traffic? I have to explain to her I'm only the fire chief. There's only so much I can do. I usually walk. Chris walks. Brief information on the fire department. We have 5 fire stations in Somerville, Teal Square, Engine 7 on Highland Avenue by Cedar Street. We have headquarters Broadway and Walnut Street, a fire station Somerville Ave and Lowell Street, and Union Square. We have a great mutual aid system around us, so when the Ball Square Bridge closes, it's going to cause us a bit of a problem with companies from fire headquarters getting west. I have an agreement in place with the Cambridge Fire Department. They have a fire station right on Mass Avenue outside of Porter Square. They're automatically going to send us an engine company any reports of fires up the west end. Same thing's going to happen east with the Washington Street Bridge. I have an agreement in place with the Boston Fire Department. They have a fire station right in Charlestown, basically right at the end of Broadway, and they're going to send us a company as well for any emergencies down at that end. Fire response times are very important to the fire department. The fire department constantly meets with people like Brad, Rich Rach, the city engineer, when there are big projects going on, and we sit down and discuss response patterns, what they can do to possibly modify plans so that the fire trucks can get around. Sometimes the projects, it's inevitable, there's no way around, and we have to figure it out. When it comes to response times, the mayor, the fire department, we take response times extremely serious. NFPA wants us to get our gear on in a minute and then be on scene within another 4 minutes for a total of 5 minutes of response time. As you can see, despite all the construction, last year our average response time was 3 minutes 28 seconds, and even with the construction this year, up until September of this year, our response time has actually dropped to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Part of that is we analyze response times. Every week I get a list of any excessive response times. We'll call the officers in, what happened. Sometimes it's a traffic, might be a traffic situation, a parking situation. I've had officers tell me we got hung up on the corner. We'll call traffic and parking. They'll will establish a fire lane, or they'll do increased enforcement on the corners, and that's a help. Sometimes we might have to modify because of construction or whatnot, where the response is coming from. So maybe if there's construction going on in a certain area, that's usually assigned to the Union Square Fire Station, but they're having trouble coming up. We'll modify it, and we analyze it and give it to the fire station at Somerville Ave and Lowell Street. So this goes on every week. We're constantly looking, and we're constantly concerned about response times.
Go around, check out different traffic patterns, see if we can tweak it for like enforcement.
Yeah, so we're constantly monitoring response times. It's very important for us, and just want to let you know that we are involved with in the planning process for all the construction that goes on. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Yes, there's preliminary discussions. I would hope it'll be part of a development project down at the 5 Middlesex Ave project. Once that gets rolling, the fire station will be part of a development. So basically, it'll be incorporated into a high-rise building. We'll have a couple of floors. That's the preliminary plans. Hope to have that in a few years down the road. Thank you very much. I believe it's on to Chief Fallon.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chris. So I'll just take a minute to introduce Captain James Donovan, who's in the back, who's the district commander, and the rest, he's actually covering East right now, and Officer Walter Collette, one of our neighborhood police officers. And it's an honor to be here tonight as your chief and talk about some crime numbers. And I mean, if you look at the second line, 2018 is projected to be a 32-year citywide low. So comparing it to 1987, crime's down 69%. So absolutely some amazing crime numbers in the city. But, you know, we meet the command staff often. We talk about, you know, what's behind those numbers, you know, and policing is a part of that. But it's really everything that's going on in the city. It's you people attending these meetings, the citizens, and the people coming to these meetings, taking ownership of their community, all the summer streets events that are going on and people attending them. I mean, everything plays into that mix. So we're very fortunate to police in such a dynamic and active city. Ward 4 crime numbers over the past 12 months, crimes that frequently impact residents, have decreased 34% compared to the same as last year. One of the big statistics that's not up here that we looked at in Ward 4 last year, at this point in time, we had 3 street robberies in Ward 4. At the ResiStat, to date, we've had 0. So absolutely amazing numbers, and we're very, you know, those are crimes that really affect people personally. We're very glad to see 0 there. But just some crime prevention tips to take away that are in your slide, your handout. And as crime tends to go down, it's never going to go to 0, and we think, looking at the data, it is going to plateau. But we're going to try to address the drivers of crime in an empathetic and compassionate manner. So we're really focusing on, the Obama administration came out with 21st century policing guidelines about 4 years ago. And we've really been focusing on the 6 pillars of those. And we think it's helped us lead to a culture change in the Somerville Police Department, and also help a little bit of culture change regionally in policing. The first pillar, building trust and legitimacy, is probably the most important. That's why it's number 1. It's really focusing on procedural justice, but looking at procedural justice as a philosophy within the police department, making sure the public feels that they have a say in the process, that the process is transparent, and that the process is fair. So I think we've made some great steps in that direction. We're reaching out more and more to the community. We're doing 12 walking dialogues where we meet with at-risk youth in the community at parks in Somerville, police officers, and they walk that neighborhood together. And they talk about, the youth say, well, this is what I think, you know, if the police come to a park at 10 past 10 at night and it's closed and they chase us all out, well, this is my thought. And the police officer says, well, if I pull up to the park because I got a call, we got calls from citizens, this is my mindset. You know, I hear glass breaking, it's dark out, kids start running, this is what's going through my mind. So I think that dialogue between the police and the youth really go a long way to establishing a connection between the officers and the youth, and really leading to a lot of good understanding. Policy and oversight, pillar 2, calls for transparency, and we've put all our policies online. So every policy and procedure of the Somerville Police Department is now online. You can go on there and look at them and view them. We're a certified police department, which means that we're meeting the gold standard in our policies and procedures. And it's really, it's not normal, it's not often that a police department our size becomes certified. And probably within the next 6 months, we're becoming an accredited police department. So we're very excited about that. It's a big step forward for the Somerville Police Department. Pillar 3, technology and social media. We're trying to improve our outreach to the community through our social media platform. Pillar 4, community policing and crime reduction. We're making great strides through community policing, and we awarded the 2018 Community Policing Award for a police department that serves over 50,000 population. And that was from New England Chiefs of Police. Our work with teen empowerment was recognized on a national level at the opening of the National Law Enforcement Museum's inaugural temporary exhibition in Washington, D.C. So it's excellent. Training and education. All Somerville police officers have been trained on impartial police training within the last year. We're training on procedural justice and legitimacy training. And a big part of that is we established our CORE office, and CORE stands for Community Outreach, Hope and Recovery. And it goes to how we're addressing some of the drivers of crime, people suffering from opioid addiction, people suffering from mental health problems. And officers are receiving through our CORE office CIT training. And CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Training. And it's a 40-hour training block that really focuses, number one, on de-escalation. So when an officer goes to a call, his mindset, number one, is how do I de-escalate this situation? Secondly, how do I connect this person to resources in the community? Yes, arrest is an option, but oftentimes it should be your last option. If the person has an opioid issue, work with them and the family to connect them to resources in the community. If they're in the throes of mental health crisis, maybe the last thing you should do is put them in a cell at the station where they wait to go to court next day. Maybe the next best option, or the better option, is to work with people in our CORE office and connect them to services in the community. And through the backing of the city and through the Department of Mental Health, we now have 2 full-time licensed clinical social workers that work at the Somerville Police Department that work with the officers on following up on every call that has a mental health component to it. We have a full-time alcohol and drug addiction specialist at the police department that's working with the officers on following up on all those calls. So we've seen a great success with that, and it's really led a culture change. It's really, it's really the Somerville police officers, to their credit, that are leading on that. We've had great success with CIT. We became a TTAC, and now we're training about 21 area departments on crisis intervention training. So we're not only training Somerville officers, now we're training, I think it's close to 26 area police departments. And also our CORE office is doing Recovery Coach Academy, mental health first aid, youth mental health and first aid, and teaching those in the community as well. And we do have a full-time recovery coach at the Somerville Police Department also now, who's working with people with opioid addiction. The last pillar, it's the last, but sometimes I think it's the most important, because we're really talking to officers about, taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. And remember what you got in the policing for, maintain the guardian mentality throughout your career. It's easy, sometimes not easy, but, police officers come into work and they look at police magazines, digital magazines online, and it says, police officer stabbed in New Jersey, officer shot in Las Vegas. And the officers can get the mindset of, well, we got to gear up, it's us versus them. But if it's us versus them, we lose. But if we work collaboratively together with the community, there's really no problem that we can't address. So we're working towards that mindset. Last year, we had all Somerville police officers took a day of mindfulness training, just to sit back and take a second for yourself and say, if I'm going to a call, I need to be present at that call. I need to be there, not thinking about, 10 minutes after or 10 minutes before, but be present at the call so you can give that citizen, the help that they need. So we think we had a lot of success with that. And we're going to focus more on what's called Blue Courage training. And blue coverage training is really strictly around having the guardian mentality. Remember whether you got 2 weeks or 20 years on the job, remember what you got into policing for, and that's to make your community better and assist people that are in need in your community. My last slide is a takeaway that we just wanted to give some information of some resources that our core office uses often, but also, substance misuse and mental health supports within our community. But I can take a couple of questions also, but I will be here. Captain Denner will be here, Officer Collect for the rest of the evening. All right. I appreciate your time. Have a great night. Thank you very much.
So I know that these seats are super uncomfortable, and I'm guessing no one's going to mind if we end a couple of minutes before 8. As I said, everyone's going to be here. If you have more questions or issues you want to talk about, I did want to ask you all to do 2 favors for me on your way out. One is stop by the snack tables in the back. I'm not sure what's left in terms of pizza and cookies and fruit and veggies, but the more you guys grab, the less I have to carry home, the happier I will be. And also stop by our info tables on the way out. We talked a lot about construction tonight, but believe it or not, there are a ton of other things going on in Somerville that, if we tried to cover them all, we'd need to have brought our pajamas and sleeping bags. So stop by, grab some of that information. One thing definitely worth checking out, right now there is, at least as far as I know, sort of an unprecedented amount of affordable housing opportunities in the city. So these are all income-based housing opportunities, and what is especially rare is we're about to have 15 homeownership units come online, which is, usually you might see 1 or 2 every couple of months. So there's really a lot going on there, a lot of opportunities if you or someone you know may qualify for those. I think we do have some info packets over there. All of the information is available on our Housing Division's website, and Bryant Gaspard from our Housing Division is here in the back. Wave. So you can also talk to him about that, as well as he told me earlier he's very excited. He learned that Game of Thrones is coming back in April, so something else you can chat about if not affordable housing. So again, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We do these meetings twice a year, so we'll be doing them in the spring, talking about probably something else, hopefully not a ton of construction updates. Hopefully everything will be going smoothly. Everyone will already know about it. So have a great night, and we'll see you again this week. Oh, one more thing.
I do just want to bring up the school committee chairs, Ward 4 resident Andre Green. One thing we want to plug to you all, some important activity happened in schools. Whether you have kids in the schools or not, it is important for all of us. So I'm just going to have Andre give us an update on something.
Sure, I'm going to make this real quick. As we said, there's a lot of construction going on currently, but we're also including a new high school, which thank you all for supporting. But while we're doing all this construction, we're also planning the next generation of Somerville. And so part of that is an initiative we've launched with funding from Nellie Mae Foundation, partnership between the city and the schools called Somerville Learning 2030. And on that table full of resources, there's this postcard. I'd ask everyone to pick up this postcard. You have a little smartphone, you can wave your Q reader on this thing, or you can go to the link on the card. And we're doing a quick survey about what you think about the situation of learning here in Somerville and where it should be going over the next 20 to 30 years. Even if you don't have kids, this is important. 1, 40% of your tax dollars goes towards paying for our schools, so you're paying for them if you don't have kids. And 2, no one wants to live in a city full of stupid people. So good schools and good education is important for everybody. So please, take 10 minutes, fill out the survey, give us your input. It will help us decide what are the proper values to guide Somerville schools as we move on towards 2030 and beyond. And if you have questions about what's going on with the schools and the construction, and yes, the parking lots and all those other things, I'll be here. Feel free to ask me. Thanks. Thanks for your time.
Captain Donovan?